Welcome to the Misophonia Podcast. This is episode 24. My name's Adil Ahmad, and I have misophonia. This week, I'm bringing a conversation with Isabel, who lives in London, England. She's in her early 20s and has had miso from a young age, like most of us. It's really accelerated, though, in the last few years, but she's also recently found out what it is, like most of us, and is taking steps to deal with it. She's also at the beginning of her work career, and so we talk about being at the beginning of your career, knowing you have miso, and what she hopes the future holds. You can tell by listening to this episode that it was recorded in pre-COVID-19 times. It's the last of that batch of interviews. The next episode you'll hear hasn't even been recorded yet. Speaking of COVID, I hope everyone's hanging in there and taking advantage of this time away from other people's sounds as at least one positive thing from this. I've actually had a past interviewee reach out and want to share their miso experience during lockdown, so I might bring that. If you'd like to talk, just hit me up via email, hello@misophoniapodcast.com, or send a message on Instagram @misophoniapodcast, or on Twitter @misophoniashow. Now here's Isabel. Welcome, Isabel, to the podcast. Good to have you here.
Thank you.
So, as you're a listener of the podcast, so, I usually just kind of like to start by asking, whereabouts are you and what kind of, what you kind of do?
So I'm in London. I'm 23, so I graduated last year, and since then I've worked a little bit in the publishing industry, just through internships and a temporary role. I work as a bookseller at the moment, just in a bookstore for the Christmas period. So that's me, I guess.
Excellent. Yeah, cool. And I guess so. Listeners don't know this, but you just had like a interview earlier before this.
Yes.
So I guess you're looking for a job. So let's start by talking about kind of your recent kind of work environments and how they've been for you.
I mean, it is always difficult. There's always these invisible barriers that, for me, I think they stop me from doing things as well as I'd like to.
Mm-hmm.
It's quite hard when whether it's in an office and you're on a computer and people around you are triggering you and you've just got to pretend that everything is fine. In my old role, sometimes I could just put in headphones and everything would be all right. Being in a bookshop, though, it's a lot harder because you can't do something like that. You're in a customer-facing role, and I feel like if I actually responded as I typically would to triggers, people would just think I was insane, and
right, they would run out of the store. And I guess in a bookstore, it's kind of like a library where you have to be extra quiet, and so those triggers are just kind of extra deafening when they happen, I guess.
Yeah, that's probably the hardest part because everything is just so heightened. Like, I've worked in restaurants and cafes before where there might have been, loud music playing, or there might have been really loud clanking, or maybe the dishwasher was behind me or whatever it was, and it would drown out those noises. I mean, there would be visual triggers, but I could pretend I was looking really hard at my screen or something as I was normally on the till, and it would just be a lot easier to avoid those noises. So even though books are a lot more interesting for me, it is a lot harder to actually be in that environment.
Any chance to blast any terrible Christmas music in the bookstore?
There was one day when we had a Christmas event in the evening. It was really great, actually, as they had live music. They were playing Christmas songs, and someone was actually playing the saxophone over the top of it, and it was such a relief. But normally there isn't really anything playing. I'm hoping, as it's the week before Christmas, I'm hoping they will start doing that, but it doesn't seem like the sort of place where they would.
Gotcha. So, so you're 23. So, I guess working. I guess might as well go way back. When are your first rough memories, or around when you realized you had something was off?
I mean, it started when I was really young, actually, although it wasn't that severe. I remember being maybe 8 or 9, and my brother who's very similar in age to me, used to like belch a lot, and he found it really funny. When I was 6 or 7, I found it funny, and then as the years went on, I started getting increasingly angry with him and kind of screaming at him to stop. And it obviously seemed like I was just being really unreasonable. That's the earliest memory I have, but things got significantly worse when I was maybe 11, getting seated next to particular people in school who might make a very repetitive sound, and gradually those sounds would start to trigger me. Things became worse throughout secondary school, and it made it really hard to concentrate, actually. But
Did it start to affect your grades and whatnot?
it did. There was one lesson, my English class, when I was about 16, where it got so bad that I actually just had to wear earplugs for most lessons and just kind of hope that the teacher wouldn't call on me. If she did, I'd have to react really quickly. But I ended up just teaching myself a lot of that course, which wasn't too challenging, as English has always been my strong point. But I think it was a detriment on my grades, especially in exams. That was really hard.
Yeah, yeah, we've done exams have come up a lot in these episodes. So that's interesting. So your brother was kind of your first trigger, and it was actually something that you found enjoyable at first, and then it flipped at some point, or was it kind of was it gradual over the years, or were there? Do you remember like a short period of time where it might have flipped?
Um, I'm not sure. I think I was probably around 9 when it flipped. I think maybe with the increased frequency, I just started to think, oh no, actually, I really don't like this
Okay,
noise. But the
yeah,
more I react to it, the more he does it because he just found it quite funny. I mean, I
yeah.
didn't actually open up to my parents about how bad this was for years because I thought everyone would just think I was crazy. I thought I was crazy before I knew what it actually was, so I just kept it to myself
How,
for
yeah,
long.
how did you react? Or did you react, or did you bottle up, or did you, I don't know, punch him, or how did you?
I think I got quite angry
Mm,
when I was a kid. When it first started, I would like yell at him to stop, or I mean, because it gave me that feeling of just wanting to run away, wanting to cry.
fight or flight? Yeah.
Being really young, I didn't know how to express that. Now I guess I'm an expert at suppressing it, so I don't express things as much anymore.
Did your parents notice it at all?
I think they just thought I was trying to get at him. When we were kids, we used
Sibling
to
kind of thing.
argue
Yeah.
a lot. So, yeah, that was a big thing for us.
And did your triggers expand to them at all, your parents, or like did they start triggering you?
They have a lot more recently in the past few
Mm,
years, which is probably the worst part, that everyone that I care about does have a trigger that affects me
mm.
in different settings, whether it's eating or maybe a sound from the other room. It feels like any situation with family, I'm having to really focus on how I'm going to navigate it. It stops you from actually enjoying the presence of people as much as you'd like to, and I'm sure that's very common for a lot of people.
Very, and but you've chosen kind of like to just kind of hide it from everybody.
Um, Now I'm a lot more honest about it with my
Hmm.
family and my friends. So my family are often really sensitive, and my friends are brilliant as well. They've like researched the condition a bit once I actually try to explain things for them. I used to just hide it as much as I could. Say on in secondary school, we would go on theatre trips. I studied drama when I was 16, 17, and the noises in the audience were just awful for me. And I would just hope that I wouldn't like start crying and that my friends wouldn't notice. But as I've got older, I mean, in my adult life, I've actually been able to share stuff with my friends, and they've all been brilliant, and my family have been the same.
That's amazing. That's great to hear. And did you when did you find out that it had a name?
It was completely by chance. I was about 15, 14 maybe, and I used to go on these websites about like, weird facts and stuff like that. And one of them was, oh, there's a condition called misophonia that explained that it's a hatred of certain sounds. And I thought, oh, that sounds interesting. And so I
Mm-hmm.
Googled it and I was like, oh my gosh, this is me. And then my life just completely made sense. And it was such a
Mm-hmm.
relief that it was actually a condition.
How
And
long ago was that, roughly?
that was about 7 or 8 years ago,
Okay.
maybe.
Yeah,
But
so sometime in high school.
yeah, I didn't actually tell anyone about it for a while. It was a good few years. And I think like my family were generally just still quite confused about it because I was a bit scared of actually saying this is a condition that I think I have.
What scared you about that?
I don't know really. It was I've always been quite withdrawn, I guess, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't really like the attention being on me. And I thought, oh, it'll just be a thing that makes me stand out, and my family will think it's a bit weird.
Yeah, and every time you walk into a room, people will be, you don't want them like staring at you, wondering if you're being triggered.
Mm.
So as you were getting more triggers, did visual triggers also come up too, other than auditory?
Oh, definitely.
Mm.
I mean, since I had to basically live most of my life in headphones, I feel like the condition basically found its way of just worming itself into every
Ah,
aspect of my
yeah.
life. So being in really crowded places is very difficult. It's often the noises, it's often the movements that I associate with the trigger sounds, and it gives me the exact same feeling that the sounds do now, which is quite sad. It feels like nowhere's really safe anymore, and
Yeah,
it's
so
like just another thing to worry about.
it's an interesting way to put it. It's creeping into your other senses. So even if you've got headphones on, if there are visual triggers or movement triggers, that's I guess the definition of misokinesia. Your brain will associate that.
Yeah, I mean,
Mm.
it makes things like public transport just
Oh God,
unbearable. I
yeah.
used to be able to like zone out on my way to work or whatever, school, but now, I mean, in my last job and in my current job, actually, I'm having to get the train every day. And being in that really crowded environment, I've got my headphones as loud as they will go and my eyes closed, and it probably looks a bit strange, but I really don't care. It's just about like surviving that situation.
Yeah, I feel like yeah, tube trains they should maybe have the chair benches pointing out so you can
Mm,
look outside instead of looking at all
yeah,
the other freaks on the train.
yeah.
Um and so yeah, so you do headphones and you close your eyes. Are there any other kind of like little habits or tricks or coping mechanisms that you've come up with?
Um, Sometimes I find that rubbing my thumb against my forefinger kind of helps me to
Mm-hmm.
focus my attention on something else. It's something that I do to just kind of manage that anxiety. Obviously, it doesn't actually stop the physical
Yeah.
response or anything, but it is something that I've managed to take a bit of comfort from. Other than that, it's mostly just avoidance. Like at work, I'll make an excuse to like go into the back room and say I'm like checking on the stock or whatever it is,
Right. Right.
just to get like a minute of like respite from all those noises.
And
Um,
employers, if you're listening, this is a good thing. You don't want to have your employee freak out, so
yeah.
let them go back there, whatever they need to do. And do they give you so accommodations at work come up a lot? Have you had to talk about this with any of your past employers? I know you're relatively young, so you probably haven't a ton of jobs experience, but
No, employers just have no idea.
Mhm.
It's something that my friends and family know about, something I share tweets about sometimes, and articles when I see them, but it's not something that I've ever actually like disclosed to an employer. So I
Mhm.
feel like just the whole having to explain what it is and is really difficult actually. I find it so hard to actually sum up what the condition is. Online it's a bit easier as you have say a good article that breaks it down really well and articulates it in a way that I probably couldn't. Um, it's just not a territory that I've actually gone into with employers. So
Yeah, it's weird. It's one of those things that's so clear to us, but then when we open our mouths, it's like, how do I make this not sound
yeah.
weird or just trivial? Because everyone
Well,
gets annoyed by sounds, but you gotta like explain how, okay, it's much, much different than that.
that's a response I've had so many times,
Hmm.
actually. I mean, when I was really young, not really young, but when I was in high school, like maybe 15, I did try explaining it to one of my friends who didn't really have the understanding at the time, and she said a lot of people get annoyed by sounds, and I think the impression was that I was kind of making it up for
Mm-hmm.
attention.
Mm-hmm.
So that scared me a bit and stopped me from actually like talking about it because I just found that I couldn't articulate it. I found myself going like, so I know no one likes the sound of, you know, whatever it is, but for me it's different, and it's so hard when they don't have that experience to actually explain what it's like.
Yeah. Yep. No, yeah, a lot of us have run into that. That's very, yeah, very common too.
Mm.
And did you, what kind of other reactions were you getting from friends or family members over the years?
My parents were worried at first. I think I'm like my dad took me to the doctor.
Okay, so he took you
Um,
to like a audiologist or like a therapist or
just
psychiatrist?
our GP. It was a negative experience. I mean, he was there trying to explain like she looks like she's actually in pain when she hears these noises, and the doctor just said, "Well, no one likes these sounds," and I just got a very dismissive response.
Yeah.
So that really made me quite scared. And then, I mean, a few years later, I spoke to a doctor about it, and they tried me with like CBT, but obviously, a lot of the time that relates to exposure therapy and things like that, and it just wasn't right for me because the issue was that I was exposed to those sounds all the time, and it didn't stop me from getting that reaction.
Got it. It's that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And what did your dad say after that initial that experience with that first doctor?
Well, I can't really remember. I mean, we were both kind of disappointed, as I think. Um,
Gotcha.
like we were kind of hoping for a bit more
Hmm.
in like enlightenment on what was actually going on. Um, but I mean, I spoke to a therapist a lot more recently who had actually heard of the condition and was really understanding and like really brilliant about it. So it's not been all bad.
This is a local one in London.
Yeah.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. And has that therapist been able to help in any coping mechanisms or just or is it more just somebody to kind of talk to?
It was really just someone to talk to.
Hmm.
Just it was really brilliant to actually have someone who understood the condition and had actually heard of it, and I didn't have to go through the whole explaining
Yeah.
what it was. I could just kind of vent about it, which was really good, especially being someone from outside of my family. I feel like I don't want to, you know, talk exclusively to anyone about it because it feels a bit like being a burden. But when it's, you know, like a therapist, it's like their job to actually.
Right. Right. Yeah, but you'd be surprised at how many therapists don't take them job seriously in
Mm.
this for this condition. Have you met other people who have misophonia?
No, actually, I mean, you're the first person that I've spoken to. I have just come across people online.
Yeah.
Um,
There's got to be a lot in London. There must be some way to. I know the UK actually has quite a bit of. When I read about, I don't know, groups on Facebook or whatnot, there seems to be a big UK presence. So I don't know. If you were interested, I'm sure there's a lot of people in London who are
yeah,
open about it.
yeah. I mean, I've never met any of these people, but I would like to.
Yeah, that's something that came up in the past few months. Is like there seems to be people who are more interested in kind of doing meetups and meeting up to talk about it. Initially, I think everyone thought, oh, a bunch of misophones getting together. It sounds like a disaster. But I think there's a lot of comfort that comes with hanging out together. So,
Yeah,
um,
I think just people having that awareness of like other people's potential triggers, everyone would be really sensitive, I think, in that situation. Just having that understanding there.
it is, and it's interesting, yeah, to kind of be on the other side and try not to trigger other people. I know here in the States we have some email groups. We have like a couple weekly conference calls that happen, and
Oh,
so
cool.
it might be interesting to set up. I don't know, maybe we can talk offline or figure out how to get that happening in Europe.
Mm.
Um, That's interesting. So did it affect, so going back to just kind of high school, just curious about kind of like social life in high school, before you maybe knew what it was or you were telling many people, was it affecting, I guess you said you were kind of a withdrawn person anyways. Do you think that's kind of was kind of related to your misophonia? Did that start it, or was it a consequence of it?
I don't think it was. I've been
Mm.
really quiet like for as long as I can
Yeah,
remember, really. I think it did just mean that when it came up, I was inclined to just keep it to myself rather than actually telling anyone about it for ages. It didn't used to impact me the way that it does now. I remember I used to be able to like go to the cinema with friends, go for meals out without having to worry too much. Whereas now I'm thinking, how am I going to get there? Is it a setting that I can actually manage?
yeah. So that's just in the last few years that it's kind of really accelerated.
Yeah, probably the last. I remember my reactions got really bad maybe 7 years ago. Before then, most situations were manageable. After that, I would put up with settings that I found really, really difficult and just try not to react. But now there are just some things that I absolutely can't do. But my
Can't do.
friends are really understanding about that, so we usually work something out that isn't going to be really triggering and detract from us actually enjoying like each other's company.
What were kind of college years like?
Oh, that was hard.
Mm.
I tended to avoid lectures or just kind of stand at the back of the lecture theatre so that I felt like I could get out the door if it got really
Yep.
bad.
Yep.
I studied literature with creative writing, so we had mostly seminars rather than lectures, which was a lot better actually, as I didn't encounter anyone actually like eating in class or anything like that. So that was
Fantastic.
quite lucky.
Yeah.
Um, Sometimes it would be quite hard actually if we were on the ground floor and I was near a window and I could hear, say, like, I mean, coughing is a big trigger for me.
Oh,
If I
yeah.
had someone go past and like cough outside the window, that would be really awful. But things weren't too terrible. I think I was a bit more cut off than students normally would be, as I did kind of live my life in campus, wearing headphones pretty much all the time.
Did you have roommates?
No, I mean, I had flatmates, but I had the room to myself.
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
yeah, things weren't really bad in the flat. I just spent a lot of time in my room, I guess. But none of my flatmates actually triggered me at all.
Oh, wow. Lucky you. That's great.
Yeah.
And did you have to, being in literature, creative writing, did you have to like listen to somebody, read their work, and you're just like, just drink some water, please? Like, were they, um, or was it generally fine? Like it was more writing and then kind of like silently reviewing other people's works.
Generally, it was all right, actually. We were quite like engaged with each other, reading out extracts and getting
Hmm.
involved with discussion, giving feedback. But I it got to a point where I felt quite safe in those classes because there were just very rarely any triggers. So for me, I was lucky that it didn't affect that area of my study.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, great. And so how have so yeah, we talked about this. I don't know when this will post probably not for another few months or so, just because I've had such a backlog. This is actually the last recording of the year.
Ah,
You have that kind of honor, but unfortunately that means that it might not post until like March or April or so, just because there's been so many. But anyways, the point I was trying to get to is that since the holidays are coming up, and you've been dealing with it at work, how do you prepare for kind of holidays with family? I guess they're
oof.
pretty accommodating, but I'm curious. There's all kinds of, I don't know if you go to church. Church is a disaster sometimes, but even family meals can be a bit of a challenge.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't been to church in years because the last time I was in church, maybe 8 or 9 years ago, I like started crying and had to leave early. So
Hmm.
that just doesn't happen anymore. Having family around is not. It's not, I mean, it's difficult. They do know that I have misophonia, but I think that they don't quite understand it as much as my immediate family. Like, they might um, think that it's being with a lot of people that I struggle with, or being with loud noises, whereas it's the very specific sounds that they do increase in frequency as there are more people with more triggering sounds. So yeah, mealtime is gonna be difficult, but I tend to just kind of lean on one hand and have a hand like subtly over my ear so that I can try and block out the noise with like my own
Yeah.
sound. It's just kind of getting through it. It is sad that like I can't enjoy it as much as other people, but that is something that I'm quite used to now.
Yeah. I guess with meals, like, sure, we think about like how do I eat quickly, or tell ourselves that, it's just for another half hour or so, and then I can run for those headphones.
Yeah. I'll probably find an excuse to like play music really loudly, play some
hmm
Christmas songs or something. And
Yeah, right. Hey, I'm really festive. Let me blast some
yeah.
loud Michael Bublé or something.
Yeah.
Um, I guess, yeah, we'll start wrapping up soon. I'm curious, just going back to the fact that you did have an interview earlier. I'm curious, like, you're still young, like you have a long career ahead of you. Have you thought about career paths and related, especially related to misophonia? Have you thought about kind of what kind of jobs that you would like to do ideally?
I know I want to work in publishing,
hmm
and I mean, I'm quite interested in nonfiction around, um, like possibly around titles around kind of neurodivergence and different
hmm
issues like misophonia that I think people just don't know anything about. I would really love to see a book like published about it, coming from like drawing on people's experiences. I mean, if I was an editor, that is something that I would love to do. But I just know that I want to work with books and kind of hope that having misophonia doesn't detract from that too much. I mean, it's challenging, but yeah, I hope I get to work with books and enjoy it as much as I can.
That's fantastic. Well, yeah, Isabel, want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and um, the holidays will be long gone by the time it's posted. But wish you a good holiday,
You too.
and yeah, and good luck in 2020
Thank you.
with me. So
Thank you very much for having me on.
thank you for listening. As I said, it's pretty obvious that this was recorded before coronavirus hit. I'll be going back to the microphone soon to record new interviews. I can't wait to have more conversations about miso, especially now. Please leave a 5-star review if you like the show in iTunes. The music this week is by Moby, and until next week, wishing you good health, peace, and quiet.